I'll never forget the look on Rachel's face when the waiter handed her my note. She was sitting at a small corner table near the windows, soft candlelight flickering off her wine glass. She wore this red silk dress I hadn't seen in months, maybe years, and she looked good. Real good. Her hair was done in soft curls, the kind she only used to fix when we had anniversary dinners or fancy galas for her job. She leaned in close to the man across from her, laughing. Not just a chuckle, but one of those high, careless laughs that used to be reserved for me. That laugh, God, it used to make me feel 10 feet tall. Now, hearing it in that setting, aimed at some stranger in a tailored jacket and a smug look on his face, it made my stomach twist like barbed wire. She took a sip of wine, daintily, with her pinky hovering like she was royalty. And then the waiter approached. A young guy, polite, clean-shaven. He slid the folded note in front of her like it was the bill. She smiled, maybe thinking it was from her new friend. But when she opened it, I saw her eyebrows knit together. Confusion first, then a blink, panic, and then dread, the kind that spreads slow and wide across a person's face when they realize the parachute they packed is nothing but old bedsheets. She looked up. I saw her scan the room, her eyes moving like she was chasing smoke. And then she saw me. I was sitting 2 tables away in a dark booth, alone, glass of bourbon in my hand. I held her gaze and lifted my glass slightly. A quiet toast. The note had said, "Enjoy your dinner. I hope it tastes as good as the lie you told this morning." 15 words. Just 15. I wrote that line 100 times before I found the right tone. I didn't want it to sound angry. I didn't want it to sound like a scene. I wanted it to land like a shovel to the gut, cold and sudden. Final. I folded it sharp, tucked it in my jacket pocket, and when I saw her sit down with him, I called the waiter over and handed it off with a 20. Only to the lady in the red dress, I told him. Just her. Don't say a word. Just deliver it. He nodded like he'd done this before. But that moment, her face, her silence, the collapse of her grin, it didn't come out of nowhere. So let me rewind a little. Give you some background. My name's David. I'm 42 years old, born and raised in Missouri. My old man worked at the Ford plant until they shut it down in '07. Mom was a teacher. We didn't have much, but we had each other. From the time I could drive a pickup, I believed in loyalty, in working for your life, not around it. I met Rachel in college. She was in the graduate business program, smart as a whip, with a chip on her shoulder about being underestimated. I liked that about her. I was finishing my last year in mechanical engineering and paying my way through by working nights in a machine shop. She had a fast mouth and a sharper brain. Beautiful, too. I asked her to dinner after a study group, and we hit it off right away. 10 months later, we moved in together. We were married a year after that. 10 years. That's how long we were husband and wife. She worked her way up the corporate ladder, marketing exec for a rising firm. I was steady at my job, moved into operations at a manufacturing plant outside Jefferson City. We had a good thing. Or so I thought. I did all the little things, booked her massages when she was stressed, left notes in her briefcase when she had big meetings, remembered her mom's birthday every year. Every single one. Did we argue? Yeah, sometimes. She liked fancy vacations. I liked our little lake cabin. She wanted to upgrade the kitchen again, and I thought the stove still worked just fine. But they weren't deal-breaker fights. At least, I didn't think so. I chalked it up to the natural wear and tear of 2 people building a life. The thing is, I trusted her. Completely. That wasn't a conscious choice. It was just in my bones. She was my wife. You don't question that kind of bond. Not when you've seen each other through layoffs, through your old dog dying, through sick parents and sleepless nights worrying about bills. You build something with someone, you assume they're in it for the long haul. That assumption was my biggest mistake. It didn't happen all at once. There weren't red flags flapping in the wind. It was more like a slow leak. She started working late more often. Forgot to respond to my texts. She used to send me goofy memes, little emojis when she got to work. That stopped too. I noticed, but I didn't panic. I thought she was just tired, stressed. And then, one day, I had a conversation that cracked the whole damn foundation. But that's for later. For now, all you need to know is that I saw her in that restaurant, laughing with another man like he'd just rescued her from a fire. And when she read my note, the air left her lungs. Just like that. That was the first moment I knew I wasn't married to the person I thought I was. Not anymore. And maybe not for a long time. It was a Tuesday, mid-morning, the kind of day that looked warmer than it felt. Bright sun, but the wind still had its winter teeth. I just finished a meeting at work that could have been an email and figured I'd walk over to Mill Creek Cafe for a cup of coffee and maybe a blueberry muffin if they weren't sold out already. It's a quiet little place tucked between a dry cleaner and an old bookstore with an open sign that's been hanging crooked since the Clinton administration. I liked it because they still brewed coffee in metal pots and didn't ask you to pick from a dozen syrup flavors just to get a drink. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in, and the smell of fresh pastries and burnt espresso hit me like a warm handshake. I stepped up to the counter, ordered my regular, medium dark roast, splash of cream, and was waiting when I spotted a familiar face at one of the corner tables. Nina, Rachel's old friend from her firm. They weren't besties, but close enough that we'd had them over a few times back when everyone was still playing house and pretending life was simple. Last I'd heard, Nina had transferred departments and moved to another floor. We hadn't seen each other in maybe 6, 7 months. She looked up from her laptop and gave me this tight-lipped smile, one of those uncertain, pinched expressions that sits somewhere between hello and I shouldn't be here. She stood up halfway like she couldn't decide whether to wave or pretend she hadn't seen me. I gave her a little nod. Nina, I said, walking over. Been a while. David. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. She tucked her hair behind her ear, clearly uncomfortable. I wasn't sure if I should say hi. I smiled politely. Well, you just did. She let out a nervous laugh and looked down at her cup like it held the answer to some moral dilemma. You got a minute? I did. I sat across from her, still holding my coffee, still not thinking anything of it. I figured maybe she wanted to talk about work, or Rachel's birthday coming up in May, or maybe she needed advice about replacing a water heater. I didn't see it coming. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, she started. I was flicking from mine to the cafe window and back again. But I saw Rachel last night. At Marzano's. My smile didn't drop right away. My mind tried to keep up. Oh, yeah. She had a client dinner strategy meeting, I think. New campaign rollout or something. Nina shook her head slowly. She wasn't with a client. Now her voice had weight to it. It wasn't just a comment anymore. It was a warning. Her fingers traced the edge of her paper napkin. She wasn't alone, she added. And it didn't look like business. I just looked at her. Couldn't even blink at first. My stomach started to knot. Not twist. Knot. The way it does when you think something's wrong, but you've been telling yourself it's nothing for so long that hearing someone else say it out loud hits you like a steel pipe. I wanted to say a lot in that moment. Ask her what exactly she saw. Who the guy was. What they were doing. But I didn't. I just sat there, still holding my cup, wondering if my hand was shaking or if the ceramic was just slick from the condensation. She said she was working late. I murmured, more to myself than to Nina. I packed her lunch that morning. Chicken salad. Told me she wouldn't be home till after 10. Nina didn't say anything else. She just looked sorry. That's the only way I can describe it, like she was watching a car accident and had to tell the driver it was his fault. I nodded, stood up, thanked her, told her I appreciated her saying something. Then I walked outside. The air felt colder than before. I didn't finish my coffee. I walked straight back to my truck, got in, and sat there. Didn't start the engine. Just sat. Both hands on the steering wheel, gripping it so tight my fingers started to go numb. I stared through the windshield at nothing. Not the sidewalk, not the road. Just nothing. 20 minutes passed. Maybe more. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, knowing full well something was broken now, and there was no putting it back together. The truth wasn't loud. It didn't crash into my life. It just slipped in like a draft under the door, and now it was everywhere. The sin of it was thick and sour. Rachel lied to me. Not just once, but enough for someone else to notice. Enough for a friend of hers, our friend, to sit across from me and say, it didn't look like business. I'd been blind. Or maybe I'd just chosen not to see. But the blindfold was off now. And I knew, without question, that something inside our marriage had shifted. Or maybe it had already died. I just hadn't held the funeral yet. Back at my office, the coffee Nina's words left in my mouth had gone bitter. I stared at my computer screen, the numbers and reports blurring into a fog I couldn't push through. Eventually, I minimized everything and just sat there with my elbows on the desk, thinking about what kind of man I'd become. Was I naive? Gullible? Or just loyal to a fault? I opened my phone and scrolled through recent calls and texts with Rachel. Nothing out of the ordinary. A photo of a garden she'd passed on her morning walk. A reminder to grab almond milk on the way home. She'd even sent a laughing emoji after I texted her a dumb joke about squirrels in our backyard. It all looked like a normal marriage. Except now, it felt like I was reading someone else's conversation. I set my phone down and picked up my desk landline. Dialed Marzano's, the restaurant Rachel claimed to be at the night before, the same place Nina saw her. "Thank you for calling Marzano's," a man answered, polite and polished. "How can I help you?" I cleared my throat. "Yeah, I was just wondering, can you confirm a reservation for Rachel Whitman tonight?" There was a pause as he checked. My heart thudded once, heavy in my chest like it was trying to tell me something before he did. "Yes, sir. Table for 2. 8 o'clock. "Thanks," I said. That's all I needed. I hung up. No more wondering. No more doubt. Whatever excuses Rachel might have had, client meeting, networking dinner, emergency strategy session, they didn't matter anymore. I had facts now. I had truth. And truth has a weight to it. I sat back in my chair and looked out the window. The factory yard was quiet, afternoon sun catching on the hoods of parked trucks. The American flag on the pole across the lot flapped in a lazy breeze. My coffee had gone cold, and I could still feel the shape of the receiver in my hand, like it had fused to me. I didn't cry. Couldn't. The tears weren't there. Something inside me, some old piece of softness, had gone quiet. And in its place, something else stepped in. Steady. Focused. Cold, but not cruel. Like a calm before a storm that only I knew was coming. I didn't want a screaming match. Didn't want to throw things or demand answers or listen to half-truths masked as explanations. What I wanted was silence, the kind that fills a room and presses down on a guilty conscience like a lead blanket. I wanted her to look up and see the man she betrayed. Not groveling. Not furious. Just there. Still. Unmoving. Like truth itself. I was done being confused. So I stood up, walked into the house when I got home, and opened the back of the closet, the side she never bothered with anymore. That's where I kept my charcoal suit. The one she used to like until she didn't. The one she once teased me about, saying it made me look like a banker with no imagination. I ran my hand over the shoulder of it, dusted it off, checked the fit. Then I ironed it. Slow, careful. Got every crease sharp like I was preparing for something sacred. After that, I shaved clean closer than I had in months. My razor caught a spot under my jaw and left a nick. I pressed a square of toilet paper against it until the bleeding stopped. I used cologne, just a touch, same brand I wore when we first started dating. One of those details most folks forget, but I never stopped wearing. I took out my black dress shoes, wiped them down, polished them, till they shined like they still had something to prove. Laced them tight, double knotted, like I did when I wanted to feel solid. In the mirror, I didn't see a broken man. I didn't see a victim. I saw myself. The same guy who'd paid her law school tuition while working nights. The one who fixed her car heater when it broke in January. The man who memorized her coffee order, celebrated her little wins, kept his ring on through every hard season life threw at us. I looked good. Not flashy. Not trying to be something I wasn't. Just the man she married only now, the version of him she no longer deserved. I stood there for a while, hands in my pockets, thinking about the dinner reservation. About her laughing, hair tucked behind her ear, with someone else soaking in the affection I hadn't seen in months. I imagined her ordering that damn lobster ravioli she always raved about, sipping Pinot Noir like it was medicine. She didn't know I was coming. That was the whole point. She thought I'd stay in the dark, that I'd just keep packing lunches and missing red flags like a fool. But the truth was, I saw everything now. And I was going to let her see me, not the wounded husband. Not the sad man left behind. The man she threw away. And the one who finally understood why. I got to Marzano's 20 minutes early. It was dusk, that kind of quiet hour where the sun's already dipped low but the streetlights haven't quite caught up yet. The sky was purple and gold, like a painting you'd find at a flea market, cheap, but still kind of beautiful if you looked at it long enough. The hostess smiled as I stepped inside. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "No," I said, "but I'd like a table near the back, somewhere I can see the front door." She hesitated for just a second, probably wondering if I was some kind of reporter or private investigator. I gave her my best don't worry about it smile, and she led me to a two-top in the corner, next to a window. From there, I had a clean line of sight to the front entrance and most of the main dining floor. Perfect. The place was quiet. Dim lighting, soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. Not elevator stuff either, real music. Saxophone drifting slow like it had nowhere to be. Candlelight flickered gently from glass holders on each table. It smelled like warm bread and roasted garlic. It smelled like the kind of place where people celebrated milestones. or made mistakes. I took my seat and ordered a bourbon, neat. Didn't want to be holding a cocktail that looked like it came with an umbrella. The waiter nodded, polite but not chatty, and I was grateful for that. As I waited, I watched. A couple celebrating something. Birthday maybe. Were laughing a few tables down. A pair of young professionals, one in a pencil skirt and the other in a shirt still stiff from the dry cleaner, talked over a shared charcuterie board. The room had that soft hum of cutlery and murmurs that feels like background noise until your world gets quiet enough to hear it. I took the folded note out of my jacket pocket and laid it flat on the table. Looked at it like it might breathe. The paper was nothing fancy, just a lined page from a yellow legal pad. Cut clean and folded once, center crease sharp. Inside, 15 words. Words I'd rewritten in my head for 2 days straight, trying to get the tone just right. Not angry, not sad, just final. At exactly 8:04, the door opened. Rachel walked in like she owned the place. Her red dress was the first thing I noticed. Silk, fitted, elegant. The kind of dress you don't wear to dinner unless you want to be noticed. And I noticed. The problem was, she wasn't wearing it for me. Her hair was curled the way she used to style it before we'd go dancing. Makeup just enough to say she cared how she looked, but not so much it looked like she was trying too hard. She looked excited, energized, younger. The man beside her was a type. Mid-30s, maybe. Trim beard, sharp haircut. Jacket tailored within an inch of its life. His watch caught the candlelight. It was one of those fancy European ones, the kind that costs more than a few mortgage payments. He walked like he'd never had to wait in line. His hand sat on her lower back as he guided her in. That used to be my hand. They were laughing. Not small talk laughter, either. Real laughter. Like they'd already had a drink before getting here. Like they were in the middle of a story only the two of them knew. I watched as they were seated at a booth near the center of the restaurant. Open space, no shadows to hide in. She slid into her seat like she was sinking into something familiar. He sat across from her, leaning forward, eyes locked on her like she was the only one in the room. I waved the waiter over. Same guy who brought my drink. Can I ask you a favor? I said, handing him the folded note. See that woman in the red dress? He looked, nodded. Give this to her. Just her. Quietly. Make sure he doesn't see it. And don't say who it's from. He glanced at the note, then back at me. Something in his expression told me this wasn't his first rodeo. I understand, he said, slipping it into his apron pocket. I'll take care of it. I thanked him, sat back, and tried to breathe normally. My fingers curled around my bourbon glass as the burn warmed my chest. I watched him walk across the room, slow and steady, like nothing unusual was happening. It felt like everything was happening. A table near the bar clinked glasses in a toast. Someone sneezed. A fork scraped against porcelain. Time didn't stop. It just got real quiet in my head. I watched the waiter approach their table. Watched Rachel smile politely as he handed her the note. She took it, puzzled, like it was a receipt or a wine recommendation. The man she was with didn't seem to notice. He was pouring her more wine from their bottle. She opened the note, and I waited for the moment I knew was coming. She opened the note with both hands like it might be something fragile. From my corner of the restaurant, I could see every step of the unraveling. 1 second, she was mid-laugh, hand still resting on the stem of her wine glass. The next, her expression shifted. Not all at once, but in layers. First, her smile dipped, just a touch. You wouldn't notice if you weren't watching for it. But I was. Then her eyebrows pulled in, that familiar crease forming between them. I'd seen it 1,000 times over the years, when she was confused or when something didn't go her way. When she read a work email she didn't like. When the cable bill jumped unexpectedly. It was her tell. And there it was again. She looked down at the paper a second time, like maybe she misread it the first. I imagined the words burning into her eyes. Enjoy your dinner. I hope it tastes as good as the lie you told this morning. Simple. Clean. Final. Her fingers twitched. That's what did it for me. That tiny tremble of her right hand, like she couldn't quite keep control of it. She folded the note back up, slower than she opened it, and set it gently on the edge of the table. Then she looked up. Her eyes swept the room, scanning every face, every table. She looked like someone trying to spot a fire before the smoke alarm went off. I watched the way her posture changed, shoulders tight, breath held. She didn't look at her date, and he didn't seem to notice yet. He was still talking, animated, probably halfway through some story about a deal he closed or a vacation home in the Keys. Then her eyes found me. I didn't look away. I didn't blink. I just raised my glass, slow and deliberate, and gave her the smallest nod. It wasn't smug. It wasn't angry. It was just quiet, like closing the lid on a box you've kept shut too long. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even flinch. She stared like a deer in the middle of a two-lane road, frozen in the beams of an oncoming truck. Her mouth parted slightly like she wanted to say something, maybe an apology, maybe a lie, but nothing came out. That silence said more than words ever could. I set my glass down, dropped a couple bills on the table, not for the drink, but for the kindness of the waiter. He'd done what I asked. No questions. No drama. Just handed her the truth, folded into a square. Then I stood. I didn't storm out. Didn't make a scene. I walked the same way I'd walked and I had high steps even. As I passed by the bar, I caught a whiff of rosemary from someone's plate and the faint crackle of laughter from another corner. The world didn't stop turning. But for her, I think it might have. Out on the sidewalk, the evening air hit me like a wave. It was cooler now, a breeze pushing leaves down the gutters. I paused under the awning, adjusted my collar, and looked up at the windows. From outside, the place looked warm, cozy, like somewhere people go to fall in love, or pretend they're still in it. I wondered if she'd follow me. Half expected it. But when the seconds ticked by and the door didn't open, I knew. She wasn't coming after me. Maybe she didn't know what to say. Maybe she thought it wasn't real. Maybe she thought I'd sit at home forever, waiting, like I always did. Cooking dinner for one. Pretending not to notice her perfume lasted longer than her explanations. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I walked down the block, the soles of my dress shoes clapping against the pavement. It was a steady rhythm. Felt like marching out of a war zone. Each step felt lighter than the last, even though my chest still carried that dull ache, the one that comes when something breaks, but the pieces haven't hit the ground yet. I passed a bakery that had closed for the night, its display case dark, the open sign turned backwards. A young couple stood outside a movie theater arguing playfully over what to see. Life kept moving. I just wasn't standing still in it anymore. At the corner, I stopped to wait for the light to change. A car passed, radio up too loud, bass rattling the frame. The kind of noise that used to annoy me. Tonight, I didn't mind. I didn't look back. Not once. I knew exactly what I'd left behind. And more importantly, I knew why. It wasn't just about the man she was with, or the lies she told. It was about the years I spent showing up, truly showing up, only to be treated like background noise. Like a placeholder until something shinier came along. I gave her everything I had. Tonight, I gave her one last thing. Truth. And I took with me the one thing she couldn't steal, my dignity. Rachel didn't come home that night. I sat up waiting till past midnight, lights dimmed, front porch light on like I was hoping she'd roll in and explain herself, maybe even apologize. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't. Not that night. I finally gave up around 1:30 and lay down on the couch, still in my dress shirt, belt digging into my waist. I didn't even bother grabbing a blanket. Just stared at the ceiling, letting the silence settle in like dust in an empty room. It wasn't the silence that bothered me. It was what it meant. By the time the sun started bleeding through the blinds, I was already up, sitting out on the porch with a chipped mug of black coffee, wrapped in one of those cool spring mornings where the air smells like wet concrete and old grass. The sky was streaked with gray and pink, and the birds were starting up, chirping like they didn't know anything was wrong in the world. And then I heard it, the sound of keys fumbling in the front door. The metal clicking against the lock made me grip the handle of my mug just a little tighter. My chest didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just waited. She stepped in like she was walking into a wake. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, like she hadn't even looked in a mirror before leaving wherever she'd been. Her eyes were red, not puffy, not like she'd been crying for hours, just tired. Like the weight of the truth had finally settled on her shoulders, and she couldn't pretend it wasn't there anymore. She saw me and froze halfway through the doorway, like she hadn't expected I'd be sitting there. I didn't say anything, just took a sip of coffee and stared. "David," she said after a few seconds, voice shaky, small. I looked at her, then back at the yard. "Who is he?" I asked, flat as the table I was sitting at. There was a pause. Then her lips moved, and what came out was worse than any shouting. "Just a coworker," she said. "We had dinner. That's all." I looked back at her, dead in the eyes. "Don't insult me." Her jaw clenched. She didn't argue, didn't try to dress it up. She just stood there, keys still in her hand, the front door half open behind her. For once, she didn't have anything to say. And I think that was the first honest thing she'd given me in months. I stood, walked inside, and let her close the door on her own. Didn't speak again that morning. She went upstairs. I stayed downstairs. Two people living in the same house, but no longer part of the same story. Over the next few days, we went through the motions. We played house. She made coffee one morning like nothing happened. I took out the trash. She folded a load of laundry and left it on the bed. We passed each other in the hallway with polite nods, like neighbors, not partners. Every once in a while, she'd try to open the door to a conversation. Carefully, like she was checking the temperature. I feel like, maybe we've both been off lately, she said one night, standing in the kitchen, arms crossed. I didn't say anything. I just mean, maybe we've been growing apart. You've been distant. Always working. Always tired. It's like I don't even know what's going on in your head anymore. I set my fork down, slow and deliberate. Took a breath. You want to talk about being distant? I said. Who booked our last 2 anniversary trips? Who remembered your mother's birthday and called her when you forgot? Who helped you edit your client pitch deck at 2 in the morning because your boss pushed up the deadline? She blinked but didn't say anything. I've always been there, Rachel, I said. Every time you needed me. Every time you didn't. I didn't just show up, I stayed. She looked down at the floor, arms wrapped tighter around herself. You just stopped seeing me, I finished. And I don't know when it happened. I just know it did. She didn't respond. Just turned and walked to the other side of the kitchen like there was something in the drawer that needed her attention more than her marriage. I went back to eating. Cold food tasted better than a cold home. That was the rhythm for a while. Half conversations. Half confessions. She tried bringing up therapy. Said maybe we should talk to someone. I told her maybe she should have talked to me before talking to him. She didn't bring it up again. Every room in the house felt heavier. The couch cushions stayed fluffed, but nobody sat there. The dining room light stayed off. Our bedroom, well, it felt like a museum. Something once lived in, now only remembered. I could feel her trying to push the blame across the table like a poker chip she didn't want to keep holding. But I knew better. She didn't break the marriage because I worked late. She broke it because somewhere along the way, she stopped choosing me. And that's the kind of betrayal that doesn't come with yelling. It comes with silence. And silence, I've learned, says everything. After the silence settled into something permanent, I started digging. Not out of rage. Not even because I needed more proof. I already knew what happened. I'd seen it with my own eyes. But there's a difference between knowing something in your gut and having it spelled out in black and white. I wanted the details. The receipts. The kind of truth you can't walk back with a tearful apology and a basket of excuses. So I started where most things leave a mark these days, her phone. She'd been careful. I'll give her that. Deleted a lot. Probably thought she covered her tracks well enough. But deleted doesn't mean gone. Not really. I used a recovery program on her old backup files. The kind you don't think about when you sync devices to the cloud and forget to check what's stored. And just like that, things started surfacing. Fragments of conversations. Screenshots she didn't remember saving. Shared calendar entries tucked away in the archive. Hotel confirmations. Rideshare logs. A photo or two that made my stomach turn, not because of what they showed, but because of how casual it all was. Like I didn't exist. One detail stood out. She and the coworker, his name was Evan, by the way, had been meeting at the same hotel in the city every couple weeks. Nice place. Not over the top, but enough to feel like a splurge. Clean lobby, valet parking, fancy soap in the bathrooms. It popped up on her Uber history again and again. Different times, different days. She'd never mentioned a client based out of that side of town. Never once. I checked our bank statements next. She always handled our accounts, said it was easier, and I never questioned it. But when I went through the joint card logs, I noticed gas station charges for rental cars. She has her own car. Always has. Turns out, it's easier to explain mileage when you're not using your own vehicle. The further I looked, the clearer it got. This wasn't a fling. This was routine. Planned. Practiced. Nearly a year. That's how long it had been going on. And you know what really hit me in the gut? She told him I was cold. That I was more like a roommate than a husband. A formality. That I didn't care. That I'd never find out. I guess I was just a name on a mortgage to her. A set piece in her little stage play of married woman. Something she could point to when people asked how things were. She was wrong. I found a string of messages between them that made everything worse. They weren't just meeting behind my back. She'd been sharing things. Not personal things, professional. I noticed attachments. PowerPoints, spreadsheets, drafts of marketing strategies. One message had the subject line Q2 forecast, confidential, and she had sent it to his personal email. That stopped me cold. Evan wasn't just some guy. He ran a boutique consulting firm. His job was to win contracts. Hers was to protect her agency's edge. But there she was, handing him her company's plans like they were a birthday card. That's when it stopped being about me. It wasn't just infidelity. It was sabotage. She was selling out her team, her company, for a man who promised her whatever he promised. I thought long and hard about what to do next. I didn't want to be petty. I didn't want to be cruel. But I wasn't going to sit on this either. So I made a call. Maya. She used to intern under Rachel a few years ago. Sharp, no-nonsense woman. These days, she worked in the ethics office at the same company Rachel was still with. I hadn't talked to her in a long time, but I still had her number saved. She answered on the second ring. Surprised, but polite. Hey, Maya. I know this is unexpected, I said. I've got something you need to see. It's about Rachel. It's serious. I met her the next day in a neutral spot, corner booth at a diner on the edge of town. I brought a thumb drive, printed copies, timeline notes. She didn't flinch. She just read through the files slowly, her finger tapping the table every time she turned a page. When she finished, she looked up and said something that told me everything I needed to hear. You're not the first person to bring concerns about Rachel. But this is something else. I nodded. I didn't do this to ruin her. But I'm not going to let it slide. Maya closed the folder, took a breath, and said, I'll take it from here. And just like that, it was no longer personal. It was corporate. I walked out of that diner knowing something had shifted. This thing that started with lies over dinner had now rippled out into something bigger than both of us. She thought she was being clever, careful, above consequence. She thought no one would ever put the pieces together. But I did. And when the truth came out, it had teeth. A few weeks later, I walked into the same building where Rachel used to invite me to holiday parties and open house launches. The kind of place where everything smells like lemon floor polish and ambition. The front desk receptionist didn't recognize me, which worked in my favor. I just nodded, signed in as D. Whitman, and took the elevator up to the 4th floor like I belonged. It was quarterly review day. I knew because Rachel had mentioned it a dozen times over the years, how tense it always was, how important it was to impress the partners. Her company did a big meeting every few months, bringing the whole team together to present performance updates, strategic forecasts, and new campaign ideas. Basically, it was show and tell for professionals who wore expensive watches and used words like pivot and disruption in serious conversations. She always thrived in that room. Said it was where she did her best work. When I stepped off the elevator, I could already hear the muffled voice of someone speaking through the wall, confident, polished, rehearsed. Rachel. I waited outside the glass conference room for a few minutes, letting the tension build in my gut like a slow boil. Through the blinds, I could see her standing at the front with a clicker in her hand, cycling through a slide deck. Her blazer was sharp, hair in that professional updo she always saved for big moments. Her expression was cool, commanding. To anyone watching, she looked like she had it all together. In the back row sat Evan, her coworker. Same slick hair, same smug posture. Arms crossed like he owned the place. He gave a little smirk now and then, like he already knew how the meeting would end. He wasn't wrong, until I walked in. The doors opened with a quiet whoosh. A few heads turned, confused. I walked in calm, dressed in the same charcoal suit I wore the night I left the note at Marzano's. It still fit just fine. Rachel paused mid-sentence when she saw me. The clicker froze in her hand. David, she said, blinking. Good morning, I said, walking to the AV table. I won't take much of your time. I plugged in my laptop. The projector shifted, and Rachel's slide deck disappeared, replaced by my desktop. A folder labeled Internal Ethics Breach Evidence sat right in the center of the screen. I clicked it open. Nobody moved. I started clicking through. Email exchanges, dates, times, clear as day. Screenshots, file names, confidential drafts with timestamps matching internal revisions. Spreadsheets that had been forwarded outside the company's firewall. Hotel confirmations. Rideshare logs. I didn't narrate. I didn't need to. The files spoke for themselves. And then I stopped on one in particular. A pitch document she had sent to Evan 3 weeks before he presented a nearly identical strategy to one of her firm's biggest clients. Her boss, a tall guy named Harmon, sharp suit, jaw like a stone wall, leaned forward, his knuckles whitening around a pen. "What exactly is this?" he asked, his voice low. "This," I said, "is why you're about to lose one of your biggest accounts." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a paperclip drop. I looked at Rachel. She wasn't polished anymore. Her expression had collapsed into something hard to look at. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Evan had stopped smirking. In fact, he looked like he was reconsidering every choice that brought him into that room. I turned to Harmon. "I suggest you suspend her," I said, "pending a full audit." He didn't ask for permission. He looked at one of the security staff near the door and gave a nod. They escorted Rachel out without handcuffs or shouting. Just quiet footsteps on commercial carpet. Evan tried to follow her, but Harmon raised a hand. "You stay right there." I packed up my laptop, nodded politely to the room, and left. That was 6 months ago. Now, I live in a small apartment downtown. It's nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a view of the alley, but it's mine. I adopted a cat from the shelter. Named him Rusty because he's the color of old pennies and stubborn as hell. I read more now. I cook for myself. I even learned how to make that chicken marsala Rachel used to love, and now I make it just for me. I don't go to bed angry. I don't wake up wondering what I did wrong. Rachel lost her job. Last I heard, Evan was under review too. Turns out internal systems don't take kindly to leaks, especially when they cost the company money and trust. Maya sent me a thank you note. Handwritten. Said I may have saved them from bigger trouble down the road. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled. She thought I'd never find out. Thought I'd keep mowing the lawn and fixing the garbage disposal while she built a second life on lies. She thought I'd fall apart. But all it took was one note. And the truth did the rest. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you write in a note if you were in David's shoes? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.